Hi everyone, welcome and thank you so much for checking out this video. My name is Tanny and I'm an independent author and somebody who really just loves great stories. So on this channel I talk about writing, books I've enjoyed, and lessons I've learned on my publishing journey. Today I have a very exciting cover reveal for my YA fantasy novel Tethered Spirits, which is releasing in December. But before I show you that, I want to talk a little bit more about book covers. Specifically how and why I make my own book covers, and whether you can and should too. If you are an indie author like me, or you're thinking of going the self-publishing route, you are going to be responsible for your own book cover. We've all heard the saying, that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but the fact is that everybody does exactly that. A good book cover is super important because it gives readers a first impression of the kind of story that they're going to be getting and whether or not it's something that they will be interested in reading. For better or worse, readers may even judge the quality of a book based on the cover it's packaged in. Because if the author didn't put in the time and effort of getting a good book cover, who's to say that they put in the time and effort needed to write a really good story? I know that doesn't always seem fair, but right or wrong, that's kind of just the world we live in, and so book covers are really important. When you're publishing, you really need to make sure that your book cover is genre appropriate and eye-catching, and that it will draw in the kind of readers that you want to be picking up your book. Now, a lot of the advice to indie authors about book covers tends to go something like this. You really need to hire somebody else to do it for you. Do not make your book cover yourself. And to be fair, that is solid advice for a lot of people. But honestly, I feel like there are plenty of reasons where making your own book cover might be justifiable. And rather than telling people never to make their own book covers, I think it's a good idea to explore when it might actually be a good idea to do that and how to do it successfully. But before we talk about how to go about making your own book cover, let's take a minute and talk about whether or not you actually should. Because just to be clear, I definitely don't think that this is for everyone. Sure, you can save some money making your own book cover, but it does take a lot of time, particularly if you're not super familiar with graphic designing or some of the other skills that you will be needing in order to do this effectively. That's time that you could be spending on your writing, and only you can decide whether or not it's worth it to learn those skills. I personally really enjoy doing art and making graphics and things like that, so the cover design process is always really fun for me, and I don't really view it as a sacrifice of my time. But for some people it definitely can be. So far, I have made all of my own book covers, including the one that I will show you at the end of this video for my cover reveal. I really like having control over that aspect of my book, and I have very strong opinions about what makes a good book cover and the way that I want my own book covers to look. So because of that, I have put a lot of time and effort into building my cover design skills. And even then, I still feel like I have a lot more room to learn and to grow. Also, when I started publishing, I was a college student and a mom, and my husband was working his butt off to put me through school and to support our young family. So we really didn't have any money to spare to put into my books or into the publishing process for me at all. I did the cover myself because, frankly, I had to. And I'm sure there are a lot of indie authors out there who can relate to not being able to afford a professional cover design. I really believe that those people still deserve to be able to share their stories with the world. So I really don't like this idea that you should only publish your book if you can afford to hire a professional cover designer. Sure, it's a nice thing to aspire to and to want to have for your book, and if you can afford to go that route and if that makes more sense for you, then you should definitely do that. But for some people, that's just not feasible, and there are ways of creating a professional looking cover yourself if you put in the time and the effort. So let's explore that a little more. This is just my cover design process. You might find other ways of doing it that will work better for you, but here are some of the things that I've learned as I've designed my own book covers. I hope that they will be helpful for you. Step 1, look at examples. Before you even start working on your cover, you should look at the books in your genre to find examples of what book covers look good and are expected for that genre. Amazon is great for this. You can find your books category very easily and then just browse through all the covers of the best-selling books in that category. Pick out the ones that you like best and figure out what it is that you like about them and what's similar between all of them. Do you notice any common elements in the book covers for your genre, including colors, fonts, art style, or any common elements or symbols that might appear? Are most of the covers illustrated, or do they use photos? Are they simple or more complex? Which ones jumped out at you first, and why do you think that is? You can also just search the internet. I love to Google things like, best fantasy book covers or best YA fantasy book covers, best science fiction book covers. You can get a lot of inspiration that way, and there are a ton of great lists out there. So with a little time and effort, you can get a better understanding of what makes a good book cover and what's expected for the genre that you're writing in. Step 2, you want to make a plan. This is one of the most important parts of the cover design process for me, because you really can't just slap a bunch of things together and hope that it turns out right. First, you need to decide how the cover art can best serve the story. Readers should be able to tell exactly what genre your book is as soon as they look at it, and that's where all the prior research that you did is really important. A cover should also give readers a general impression of the story without giving too much away. It should be eye-catching enough to make them want to find out more, and the title should be easily readable as a thumbnail, because that's what people are going to be seeing when they are browsing through books on Amazon or other online retailers. And of course, I think it goes without saying that a good book cover should be visually appealing. That's a lot to ask of a book cover, and you're not going to be able to achieve all of that without a little planning. Some people can probably just visualize what they want their cover to look like and then go from there. Sometimes that works for me, but oftentimes I need to do a little more planning than that. So I will start with thumbnail sketches or just kind of throwing a bunch of different things together and arranging parts to see what looks best. I will often play with a few different ideas first before I decide with one that I want to stick with and move forward on. You also want to make sure that you're not tackling more than you can handle, especially if you're newer to book cover design or if you are still learning to use your graphic design program. A cover that requires you to blend several different photos and then match all of their colors and all of their lighting and make sure that it all blends together seamlessly is probably going to be a lot harder than something that is more typographic or something that uses more simple shapes and silhouettes. Just make sure that you're not biting off more than you can chew. I have definitely done this before. It becomes very frustrating very quickly, and while you can take the time to learn those skills that you need, it's very time consuming, and it's just easier if you are aware of what your skills are and start where you're at and go from there. Step number 3 is to make the cover. Once you have a plan, it's time to move on to creating the real thing. This is often the longest and hardest part of the process, and for me it often involves a lot of trial and error. Sometimes my initial idea doesn't come together the way that I wanted, so I have to go in a completely different direction. Sometimes I have to hunt down good stock images or textures that I want to incorporate into the cover, and that can just be really time consuming and tedious. Sometimes I end up having to do a lot of research or watching tutorials so that I can learn how to pull off the desired effect that I'm going for. And that is kind of one of the nice things about this, is that there are a ton of really great tutorials online and on YouTube that will teach you step by step how to do things if you're not sure. You definitely can teach yourself how to do this. It just takes a lot of time and practice. When I'm designing a book cover, I have been working in Photoshop for the last several years now, but I used to use a free kind of version of Photoshop that is called GIMP, and that worked really well too. Some of these programs have a really steep learning curve, and it can be hard to familiarize yourself with them. So if you have a program that you're already used to using and that you're familiar with, I would recommend seeing if you can do something with that first. Step 4 is to get feedback. This is another part that is really important to me in my own cover design process, and I think it's really important for everybody to get feedback on their book cover, whether you're designing it yourself or going with a professional cover designer, just so that you can make sure that the cover is doing what you intend it to do. Find some people who read a lot or who read in your genre and ask them what they think. I have a couple of very artistic friends that I like to send my book covers to, and they are always very willing to provide feedback, and they have a really good eye and are able to point out things that I maybe didn't notice before, so that I can then go back and fix those things and make my covers even better. There is also a really helpful Facebook group where you can get feedback on your book covers. I'm sure there are others, but the one that I'm most familiar with is the Indie Cover Project, and the people in there are very good at giving feedback and pointing out specifically what's working and what's not in a book cover. I will link that group in the description if you want to check it out. Step number 5 is that you want to really make sure that you're taking any print issues into consideration. Designing an ebook cover is one thing, but then designing a cover for a print book is kind of a completely separate thing. There are a lot of extra considerations you'll have to make with print books, so let's go over a couple of those really fast. First of all, you want to make sure that the resolution of your cover image is high enough that it will print as a good quality image. Usually that means it should be at least 300 ppi or pixels per inch. Any less than that and you risk losing some of the image quality when you print. You'll also want to make sure that you're accounting for the bleed or trim area. And this is because the book cover will actually get trimmed down during the printing process. So you want to make sure that there's not anything important in that area of the book that could get trimmed off. And in order to avoid having any blank space at the edges of your cover, you need to make sure that the image extends past that bleed trim area. This means that the book cover file that you upload for printing will actually be a little bigger than the actual size of the book. All of the print-on-demand services that you might use should have their own guidelines about this, and a lot of them even have really helpful templates that you can download and then just create your cover on top of that. So I would highly encourage you to look into those and track them down and use them. You'll also need to consider the spine width, which is going to vary depending on the number of pages that your book has. You can create the front and back cover pretty early on, but the spine won't be able to be finalized until you have an exact page count for the interior file of the book. So just keep that in mind that that may need to be adjusted or changed as you get closer to your publishing date, that you may need to upload a new cover file and make sure that the spine is the correct size. Also, the colors that print may not be exactly the same as the colors that you're seeing on the screen. I have found that colors often print darker than what they appear on my computer screen. And because of that, I've sometimes had to order multiple proof copies and make adjustments in order to ensure that the final version of the book prints correctly and that all the colors look right. One thing that can help with this is to print like test versions of your cover through Walmart or some other photo center where you can just print individual pictures. And honestly, it probably won't look exactly the same as the final product. I have found that there's still some color variation that occurs, but it does help me kind of get a better idea of like the levels of my colors, just to make sure that nothing is printing too dark or too light, and that everything is balanced more or less how I need it to be on the final version of the book. While it is usually possible to view a digital proof version of your book and approve that for printing, I would strongly encourage you to order a proof copy, like an actual physical proof. And you should do that before you approve the book for sale. That is especially true if you are new to this or if you're not exactly sure how the cover will look after you print it. And yes, you do have to pay for those proof copies, but to me it's a worthwhile investment. I mean, wouldn't you rather know what the book is going to look like before you send it out there into the world for everybody to see? And not only will you be able to check your cover, but those proof copies are really handy for, proofreading your book and going through it one last time, checking for any last errors that got missed, making sure all the formatting looks correct, and other things like that that are really important to putting a quality book out there. I hope those tips were helpful to you. I would love to know what you guys think about designing your own book covers, or if that's something that you have ever considered doing. Leave a comment down below and let me know what you're thinking. Before you go, I want to share the cover that I designed for my YA fantasy novel, Tethered Spirits. So, drum roll please. Ta-da! I'll be honest, the cover design process for this book was not easy. I was planning to illustrate the cover at first, and I finished this whole big complex illustration for it, and then decided that that was not going to work as well as I originally thought it would. So I had to start over from scratch. I played with a couple of design ideas first and then ended up combining elements from each of them to create this final design, which I'm really happy with. I really like the blue color of the cover. It's kind of symbolic for the story. and is related to the little blue round lights that you can see floating around on the cover. I also have all three of my main characters represented on the cover. The lotus flower in the middle there is a significant symbol for Amar and is something that we learn more about in the story. We have these flames all along the bottom that are representative of Kasari and her bond with Lucian. And Lucian, if you guys don't know, is a spirit who takes on the form of fire. And then we have the lightning bolt up at the top that represents Aleda, who we see use a lot of lightning magic throughout the story. I also really love the font. This is a font that you are probably familiar with or feel like you've seen a lot before, and that's because it appears on a lot of YA fantasy book covers. So very genre appropriate, maybe a little overused, but that's okay. I love the font and I was really excited to use it for this cover. I'm so excited to share this book with everybody. I can't wait for you all to get to read it. It's in the final stages of revision now and coming along great. It is going to release on December 14th and I will be talking about it a little more here and maybe on social media, so be sure to follow me there if you want to know more. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe to my channel and ring the bell if you want to see more videos like this in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!